about your trajectory and how you got to FRL and how you think about maybe the question Ron just answered for himself, how you think about the utility of your education in your current role. We can maybe combine all those. I think it looks like we have one person I didn't meet yesterday, Natalie. So nice to meet you. I'm Sean. I'm a assistant professor at Columbia and one of the organizers here at NeuroMatch. So why don't we start with Carlos? You want to kick us off this morning?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Carlos Hernandez. I've been at Control Labs for about 2 years now, and my work principally is extracting stable representations from our EMG signal. Prior to FRL and Control Labs, I was doing my PhD at Stanford, working on a distributed computing project called Folding at Home, which really just works on studying protein folding. So not at all related to neuroscience, but my work there was really trying to learn representations of protein dynamics and temporal signals more generally. And when I was looking for something to do after my PhD, I kind of was disillusioned with academia and didn't really want to continue in that end. So I looked into industry and more specifically in startups. These days there's a lot of investment now in biotechnology. There's a lot of exciting research going on. And I was lucky enough to stumble upon Control Labs, which was doing, work that seemed straight out of science fiction at the time, and really liked the team and wanted to be a part of it. I think the tools that I learned in my PhD were primarily computational based, and like Ron mentioned, dimensionality reduction, these sorts of things are super applicable to the work that we do here.
Cool, thanks. Steph?
Yeah, good morning, Sean, from California. So I am on the brain-computer interface team. So similar to these guys, we are trying to tap into the neural signal. The goal is to develop a silent speech interface. And I'm a program manager on the team. So my career trajectory is one from bench scientist to more science management. I did my undergrad and my master's at Arizona State. I know, Vinay, I learned yesterday that you're also from Phoenix, which is exciting. All in sensory brain-machine interfaces. And then I went on to do my PhD at Northwestern in motor brain-machine interfaces. So taking a signal from motor cortex, applying decoders to it, like the Kalman filter, neural nets, linear methods, and trying to predict muscle activity from those signals. So while I was at Northwestern, I took a science management course, which was really excellent, got me super interested in what else you could do with an academic background. So after the PhD, I didn't do a postdoc. I actually went to the government and was a contractor for DARPA, which is the DoD's research branch. Super cool job. It was launching new research programs, managing current ones, looking at data, evaluating progress towards milestones. And we did everything from AI for neurotech to neuroprosthetics to spinal cord injury. And that really set me up for a good career at FRL. So here I do similar things, think of new research ideas, work with external collaborators. One thing I want to also mention is I've been really active in neuroethics my whole career. I've been able to do this in the academy, in government, and now at FRL. Which is really great. We talk a lot about the ethical issues. There are a lot to talk about in neurotech. So happy to speak to that today as well.
Thanks. And I think we might circle back to talking about some of the things that you're interested in the neuroethics front. Just super quick comment. Obviously, we got Zoom bombed. I apologize to everyone for that. Let's just pretend it didn't happen and move on. It's really sad that there are such disrespectful people out there. Vinay, you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Vinay Jairam. I'm also one of the scientists within Control. Most of the stuff I work on these days is related to what Ron was presenting at the end, actually, this idea of how can we verify and expand the possibility of being able to do single motor unit control. My background is I did my undergrad at Harvard in neurobiology, and then did a bit of a significant shift and did my PhD in Germany at the Max Planck Institute for Intelligent Systems in machine learning methods for EEG-based brain-computer interfaces. So I kind of started out learning much more about the actual wet lab work, and then ended up doing much more of the purely computational, partially theoretic kind of stuff. And the way I got into control was near the end of my PhD. I collaborated with one of the current control lab scientists, Alexandre Barachon, and on a paper. And essentially, I was just talking to him at one point, and he mentioned that he had moved from academia into this company. And I was like, oh, well, I respect you a lot as a scientist. That's really cool. Let's look more at what this company is doing. And so one of my great frustrations when I was in academia was that all of the setups tend to be very much lab specific, and especially in fields like EEG, BCI, it's really hard to move forward because you essentially have to solve 8 different problems simultaneously, going from the hardware to the paradigm to the machine learning. And you don't have experts in 8 different things who are collaborating very closely in every single lab. So one of the things that I found really exciting and definitely pushed me to move to control at the, I guess, last June, was the idea that you'd have a bunch of experts in different fields trying to solve all of these different parts of the problem simultaneously, which I learned eventually to be true, and was one of the things that I've enjoyed the most about working here. Hopefully I didn't forget a question. There were a lot of questions I was supposed to answer.
No, that was great. Thank you. And why don't we finish off with Natalie? I hope did I get that wrong? Right? You're not coming from New York or San Francisco, right? Are you in Europe? Did I get that right also?
That's correct. I'm Natalie, and that was the right way to pronounce it. I'm Natalie Guiraud. I am currently in Europe, although my home office is in New York City, but due to coronavirus, I'm currently working from the Netherlands. I'm working, I've been with Control Labs and later FRL for a year and a month. And it's been a really exciting course. I'm currently working on feedback strategies for users, because there's a learning in there, and we're trying to figure out how to do that. And my background is kind of, it's the kind of background that might give hope to people who are not exactly hardcore neuroscientists or hardcore computational scientists, or who are thinking about it, because I started in computer science and engineering, and I did my undergrad thesis in theoretical computer science, and then I quit academia for a few years. I worked in industry, I started my own company, and all that was in Greece, and you can understand why it didn't go that well from an economic point of view. And that's when I decided to go back to academia. And then I did computational neuroscience in France, and eventually got into a PhD to do brain-computer interfaces in France, in the team of Maureen Clerc. And I worked a lot with non-invasive BCI. The objectives are kind of similar. We're trying to figure out a way to make people interact with computers and machines using their brains. And at some point towards the end of my PhD, I was more certain that I was going to go to industry, because I like to make things that go into products. I was a little bit worried about the state of how easy it is to get EEG to work immediately. And then I also had a chat with Alexandre Barachon, with who I had collaborated. And he told me about this company where they do amazing things with EMG. And then I met everybody there, and I saw the work, and I was immediately sold. So that's how I ended up there. I think that what makes, for a nice recipe is having some nice background in neuroscience, having some nice background in engineering, and having some good computational background. Any combination of the 3, I think, is a good combination. And of course, some will and believing that we can do it. I hope.
And your training, I assume, in non-invasive BMI is pretty important at FRL.
Yeah, it definitely is. But I will note that we don't have exclusively BCI people, so it's not. I don't think of it as a prerequisite, more as a bonus thing to have.
Sure. And my undergrad background was also in computer science, so I eventually became a neuroscientist. Folks, I was wondering, actually, a bunch of people have been asking about internships, and I wonder if any of you guys did an internship on your path. And if not, maybe you could still comment on your thoughts on that as an approach to getting engaged with the FRL community.
I can start briefly. You know, personally, I didn't do internship because I didn't do a PhD in the States, and in Israel, internship in industry is not. I mean, maybe it's now picking up, but it's not like as standard as it is here. But I can say that right now in FRL, we really value our internship program, and we view internship doing PhD as like the best way to get to know young promising scientists. And it's also, you know, it's a great way for us to get to know the person, but also for the person to get to know us and to understand what's it like working with us and working in industry, and kind of like it's a very good way of making this decision, because you're exposed to a long period of time, and then you can make a very informed decision about where do you want to go, and it kind of like takes a little bit of the guessing out about and the uncertainty for making this big move from academy to industry.
Cool. And
oh, sorry.
when's the best time? Sorry, no, go ahead, Vinay.
Sorry, I did do an internship during my PhD, so maybe this would be slightly helpful if no one else also did one. I worked with a prosthetics company called Autobot for a 5-month internship in the middle of my PhD. And I thought it was, I mean, like, FRL is a great place to do an internship, but independent of that, I think that an internship is just a very helpful thing to do, because if you're in the same lab for a very long time, you feel like you have a very strong idea of how things need to be done. And so kind of breaking out of that mold for a while to see other ways of doing science is just really beneficial, independent of where you do it. Well, maybe not independent of, but in a lot of places, I think you can get a lot of good information out of that.
Yeah. Thank you for adding that on. I was just going to ask, I think you sort of addressed it, is when's the best time to try to get an internship as part of the process? You know, beginning of before PhD, in the middle, you know, when you're towards the end, if you wanted to ultimately become a member of the team at FRL.
Yeah, I think that's maybe a question better that we can ask the recruiters there in the next panel. I think and I don't think there's like one answer. I think different parts of the team in FRL recruit from different stages in the PhD. For control labs specifically, I would say yeah, doing the PhD when you're thinking about your next steps, that's the right time. But other parts of FRL, you know, might be looking for other things. So maybe the recruiters have more context on that than I do.
That's a good point. So why don't we switch gears a little bit? One of the things that someone brought up, which I think is an interesting question, is the idea of open science and open source code, and the kinds of things you're doing are obviously super potentially valuable and maybe even world changing. And of course, in the context of a private company, then there's a profit motive, and those things are a little bit at odds with each other, or can be. And so it'd be great to hear from you about how the group at FRL thinks about that, and bringing this science to the masses, if you will.
Go for it.
Just to kick it off briefly, on the BCI team, so we're far from product. It's difficult. It's a difficult challenge to try and get this neural signal out of the brain. So we're looking at a 10-year time horizon. We work with external universities to try and learn more, and are very encouraging that they publish these results. A lot of this is basic science, early research, and we're happy to get that out there. So that's the BCI view. Carlos, if you want to give the control view.
Yeah, I think, you know, coming from a research lab that was very big on open source. Almost all of our code we tried to open source and tried to build a community around it. Like I think at Control Labs we're viewing that as a very important part of our research as well. I'd say you can look to other parts of Facebook, like FAIR, for instance. They open source their models, their code. We're very much interested in trying to develop a culture like that and try to engage the broader neuroscience computational community.
Cool. And maybe we had a little bit of a conversation about this yesterday, but it might be nice to expand on it. How do we think about engaging in ethical research? And open source is maybe one aspect, but there's clearly a lot more. How do you think about making sure that the studies and the participants that you're engaging with are being handled appropriately and their privacy issues are in place, and all of these things that I think people have in mind when they're thinking, especially I think Facebook has an association with privacy that makes some people uncomfortable.
Yeah, I can kick us off. The conversation yesterday about this was great. I was really glad that this question came up. FRL is super friendly, amenable, and has infrastructure to think about ethics. So we're able to invite guest speakers in. On the BCI team, we do brown bag lunches. Carlos and I have had multiple conversations about ethics and how to get engaged and make concrete decisions. If you look at our Tech at blog post online, you can find details about scientific progress, but we also talk about the ethical issues that we think about. So Facebook serves something like 3 billion people. This is a very diverse audience. How do we make sure that our technology also serves a diverse audience? So is this optics-based headset going to work for everyone, regardless of head shape, hair color, skin tone? These are the types of questions that we're thinking of. And I've been engaged in ethics my whole life, but I'm trained as an engineer. And I really want to highlight that you don't have to be an ethicist per se to think about ethics. Incorporate it into your design, incorporate it into your decision-making. I feel really strongly about that. Carlos, if you want to add more based on our discussions.
That was great. Yeah, I'd say like on the control side, we're newer to Facebook more generally, but we're looking forward to leveraging the tools that Steph mentioned and working closely with the existing BCI team and kind of the framework that they've set up for that. I'd just add that Facebook has tons of resources towards responsibility in AI, responsibility in design, responsibility in product, and I think all of those are areas where we can integrate those resources into our own work.
So let's switch gears one more time and talk back again about the science, but now maybe see if more than just Ron can weigh in, because there's a question here that I thought is really interesting, and I'd be interested to hear if you guys are thinking about this. And it actually does play a little bit into an ethics question as well, peripherally. And that is the effectiveness of the decoding as a function of mental state. And whether that's something you've observed and how you take that into account. And then maybe you can imagine taking a step further. Is there a potential opportunity here for some sort of clinical diagnosis in the psychiatric front, which is something I hadn't thought of before, but could be interesting.
So I'll say up front that we are designing consumer products. So the medical use case is not one that we're targeting. Of course, you can imagine that these technologies could later be used for that purpose. If we're successful with getting the signal out of the brain on the BCI side, there are many use cases that are wonderful. I think that's the main comment. I'll kick it to you guys and then maybe say a little bit more at the end.
So I think that it's a pretty well-known situation in, for example, the EEG BCI field, that something like stress can really affect how well BCI works, almost always making it worse. And I think I don't think we really have an answer so far as I know, but I would say that's a really important question for us, and that especially as we move closer and closer to product is something that we want to really look at very closely, because if there is a dependence on mental state, then that's a huge issue, and that's something that we absolutely can't, you know, investigate. We can't not investigate thoroughly.
Yeah, just sorry. To chime in a little bit on that, I will also say something similar, that one of the mental states that could be a hindrance, or not a hindrance, but something to investigate, is stress, indeed. And from the point of view of learning how to develop a new motor skill, that could slow down the learning curve. And it is something that we would be interested in. I have no answer about anything more than stress, because I don't know of any kind of correlation between motor function and any other psychiatric disorders. So I will leave it to this.
I think I can add neural engagement is something to think about. So I did all my PhD work in animals, and you thought about neural engagement, especially when you were presenting these non-biomimetic decoders, which were maybe difficult to learn to use. So is the animal not learning to use the brain-computer interface because it's actually difficult, because their motivation is low? So these are the types of things that I think of when considering mental state and BCI.
One related issue that's not exactly the same, but is related, is like how these products and models would perform on differently abled people. So like if people have different arm anatomies, then that's something that we have to start really worrying about as this gets bigger. I mean, I remember there was I think it was on Reddit even, that I saw a post by someone who had a different hand structure, and they were having difficulties with the Oculus visual hand tracking. And they were like, oh, how is this going to work for our community? And that's something that we're going to have to deal with in the future as well.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting. Thanks, guys. I think that the idea of neural engagement, in particular, Steph, it definitely came to my mind as well. So, you know, to what extent can you do these things when you're distracted, or when you're engaged in some other activity at the same time, and how's that going to play out, and how's that going to change the encoding and therefore the decoding that you guys need to do? That seems like interesting questions. I know that when asked about medical stuff, you guys have the canned answer. Ron used it yesterday also, of saying that you're focused on consumer products, and I appreciate that. But Alex has another question here about people with Parkinson's, and I think we could change this from saying that this is a question about how can you help people with Parkinson's to saying something again about what if the code that you would want to decode is really quite different, as it may be in the case of someone with Parkinson's. So if they want to buy your consumer product, are they going to be able to, and are they going to be able to use it?
This is really all about generalizable decoding. So the next frontier, in my opinion, is, are these decoders generalizable? Do they work across days? Do they work across participants? You mentioned transfer learning, Sean, earlier. Awesome. We need to look into this. These are great questions. I don't know that we have the answers yet, but we're starting to ask these scientific questions.
All right. Well, no, sorry. Go ahead, Ron, or whoever it was.
I can add that, you know, so some of the models that I showed you in the talk were generic models that supposedly work on everybody. We're trained on a large set of users and supposed to work on everybody with normal, okay, no, we shouldn't say normal, but able people. That in itself is a big challenge. So I think if we figure the right way to do that, how to generalize across people, it will give us a very big insight as to how to generalize it into people with different arm musculature, and I think that is like the right way to learn about it. and accomplish and make the fastest way forward.
And I'm just wondering now, just speculating myself, if you get a very robust decoder that sort of has figured out what the relevant signal is that is shared across people, that might also be able to allow you to infer some features of, say, someone in a Parkinsonian state or in some other motor state, because you can try to separate the variability between, the movement specific activity and features that are coming from their changed neural function. Anyway, I'm just speculating. I'm sure you guys have thought about this much more than I have, but I think that's probably the time we have today. I want to thank you guys all for joining, and feel free to sign off if you'd like while we're pulling in your recruiter colleagues.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Dan Wetmore here again. While we're bringing the recruiters in, I can take a minute and just kind of look at the poll results. Interesting how consistent, like the sampling across the two sessions, which I think is essentially sampling across time zones from yesterday into today. I'd have to look at the numbers, but remarkably similar, which is great. So about half of folks had never heard of FRL. That I would have been in that category last year at this time before we were acquired. And then, most other folks who had heard of FRL didn't realize we were doing neuroscience here. About almost 3/4 of folks from academia, a few industry, and people, a handful who have navigated both. So very consistent with yesterday and helpful and interesting for me. I'm glad we could introduce neuroscience at FRL to many of you. And with that, I'll hand it over to Sarah, Jacqueline, and Mark. Thanks for joining us.
Hey everyone, good morning. I'm over on the West Coast, actually in Washington State. So it's so nice to be here and we're so excited to talk to you. So I'm here, I'm a recruiter. I'm actually a PhD recruiter with Facebook Reality Labs. And lots of questions I see in the chat regarding what kind of roles are at Facebook Reality Labs. So I'm here with my partner who I work really closely with, Jacqueline. I'll let her introduce herself. And then Mark, who works more on the industry side. But to speak a little bit about the roles I kind of hire for is I do everything from internships all the way through postdoc positions, through research scientist positions, etc. There was lots of questions around internships. And although I'm a PhD recruiter, Jacqueline and I work really closely with a whole bunch of recruiters, one in particular who focuses on the bachelor's and master's students as well. So tons of different roles. And before I kick it, let Jacqueline and Mark introduce themselves, I just want to mention that I know it's a very interesting time in the world. And we are still full steam ahead as far as hiring. If you go to the next slide really quickly, I just want to mention the timeline for academic hiring. So we get the bulk of our headcount in the fall for anyone in academia. So currently enrolled in an institution or a new grad. We typically get our headcount around the fall, and that's when we start hiring for our internships in 2021. That's also when we start doing a lot of our full-time hiring as well. So through the winter months, we start filling up those positions, and we pretty much work from September through the May, but we have tons of roles currently posted right now, and we're in summer months as well. So I'll go ahead and let Jacqueline kind of talk about what she does. Yeah, it's just so nice to be here, and I'm happy to answer questions after my colleagues introduce themselves.
Wonderful. Thanks, Sarah. Good morning, everyone from the West Coast. My name is Jacqueline. As Sarah mentioned, she and I partner pretty closely in hiring out of academia. My official job title is sourcer. Basically what that means is I'm responsible for everything top of funnel. So I'm often the first person that you will be connected with, or the first person that you'll hear from recruiting within Facebook Reality Labs. So if you apply or if you're referred, I'll reach out to you to get your interview set up and get you scheduled and all that. Tell you a little bit more about the team and the interview process. Or we do a lot of independent reach outs as well. So you might get an email from me out of the blue, unsolicited at some point. I'll let Mark go ahead and introduce himself before we move on with the presentation.
Make sure I unmute first. Thanks, Jacqueline. Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, so easiest way, I think, to delineate the two teams, like Sarah and Jacqueline mentioned, they are focused on the academic side for internships, for postdocs, for new grads coming out of bachelor's, master's, and PhD programs. My team focuses everything on the industry side. So really anyone who has 1 year of experience or more in the industry would be you would be in the same contact from people on my team. So I think that's the easiest way to think about that. And my team goes beyond the academics. So a lot of positions in software and hardware, maybe positions that we're looking for more industry type experience, not just the research side, but also some of those more operations type positions as well.
Awesome. If you want to go ahead and click onto the next slide, it kind of just shows how to basically apply. So lots of questions around how do you apply, etc. So facebook.com/careers is where you can really explore. There's tons of blog posts, opportunities about the different kinds of research labs we have outside of just Facebook Reality Labs on our site. And then of course, it's also how you would apply as well. And all the job postings are linked there. One thing I will mention is I've seen comments in the chat about locations and visa applicants, and we do hire into various locations. Jacqueline can kind of go into the specifics of where we're hiring our neuroscientists. Obviously right now is an interesting time because of COVID. So our interns, we actually do have interns. Our intern program is also still going on, and it's just remote right now. So we actually have interns scattered across the world working remotely with our scientists. So we feel really proud to have continued our intern program into this next year. Who knows what it's going to look like next year as far as remote or in person. But if you are a visa applicant, we encourage you to apply just like every candidate. We sponsor visa applications, and Facebook's a really extraordinary partner as far as sponsoring all different kinds of visas. So hopefully that answers your question as well. I kind of want to kick it to Jacqueline because I'm sure everyone kind of on this call is like, I don't want to be in a black hole of applying. So Jacqueline has kindly offered her email address, which you can find in 2 slides from now. But Jacqueline, if you want to just talk about potential roles that are currently open and then where we're hiring into, and then of course your email address, which you've so kindly given.
Yeah, of course. So this list right here is just a very, very small collection of roles that we have open currently. We kind of tried to select ones that we thought would be the most relevant for folks on this call, but you can see here that there's a very, very, very wide variety of discipline areas that we hire across. So you'll see, the top one, neural interface research scientist, is for control labs, but within FRL and AR/VR in general, we hire across areas for perceptual research, machine learning, artificial intelligence, BCI, etc. You'll also see a couple of positions listed here for our sister organization, Facebook Artificial Intelligence Research. You'll commonly see that abbreviated to FAIR. And then as well, a couple of different locations. So FRL is primarily located in Redmond, Washington. Control Labs is going to be based out of New York. But we do have several opportunities in our headquarters in Menlo Park, California, as well as in Canada and Montreal, and then across Europe as well. primarily in Zurich, Switzerland, and Cork, Ireland. I also wanted to call out that we will be opening a ton of new positions in the intern space and the full-time space in probably around November or so. As Sarah mentioned, with PhD new grads, we work on kind of an academic calendar. So if you can kind of think that like we're doing our primary recruiting in kind of fall, winter into spring. So things are a little bit quieter right now, but we do anticipate opening several new roles around November or so. And I also saw a couple questions in the chat about like roles pertaining to optics or EE backgrounds, things like that. Again, this is just a very small collection of roles that we have open. We have a huge optics team. I believe this year they hired like upwards of 30 interns. So there's a definite need in that space, especially if you think about FRL working to develop like next generation AR, VR technology. Anything and everything that you could think of going into that, we are hiring for. So optics, we have a really robust computer vision team covering everything from like face human body tracking to 3D reconstruction to SLAM. We have more hardware focused roles in like the soft robotics and haptics space. So it's incredibly broad. And if you have an interest in any of those areas, I would definitely encourage you to apply. If we could skip to the next slide. So this is my email. Feel free to jot it down and reach out to me. Even if you weren't, if your research area wasn't in one of those areas listed, I work very closely with other sourcers on my team that kind of own those other research areas and can definitely forward your information along to them. I'm fairly well versed in the roles that we have open and kind of where you might, which team you might be a good fit. So please feel free to reach out. You can also feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Feel free to share my email with other, folks looking to work in FRL, in academia, whatever may have you. I believe Sarah called this out as well, but we do have some opportunities for bachelor master students as well. So I'm more than happy to forward folks' emails along to our bachelor master's recruiters as well. I don't know if Sarah and Mark have anything to add, but they do, I'll let them go ahead and talk.
Yes, I've seen the question pop up. Are there roles that involve both academic and industry affiliations in Facebook Reality Labs? So I hope I'm understanding your question correctly, but, and Mark can talk about this as well, because there's opportunities within his industry team. We do have, there's things like the AI residency program within our FAIR team. There's also postdoc positions that Facebook Reality Labs hires for. So they're 2-year stints. So you're a full-time employee at Facebook and you get all the wonderful benefits of a full-time employee, but they're basically 24 contract terms. It's we within Facebook Reality Labs call them postdoctoral positions. And there are like our other teams at Facebook doing research. They might be titled something like a residency program. Mark, anything to add here?
I would just add that, really from the industry side, we have sort of the equivalency of a postdoc. We call it a visiting scientist or a visiting professor. And typically these are positions where we open up where we're looking for a very, very specific, subject matter expertise. It's very hard to say today what those positions would be, because obviously they might vary based on research roadmap. But that is something to be on the lookout for. And traditionally what I would recommend, if that's you, if you're in the industry, but you are in more of an academic path and you are curious about what it could be like in industry, I would just be on the lookout for the word visiting on the careers page. I think that's the key word to look for, where Sarah and Jacqueline will hire people in a postdoctoral position. We would hire people in a visiting context. And I think those really are the same thing. In essence, you're really just talking about it in the essence of coming out of a PhD program versus being in the industry.
Could I, one set of questions that I've sort of seen over both last night and today, and as someone who came from academia and didn't really know how it worked to get a job in industry, do each of you have any kind of general guidance, or it can be specific as well, about how individuals coming from academia, for example, can apply, can craft how they communicate through application to put themselves in the best position?
Jacqueline, do you want to, Jacqueline is our resident resume connoisseur and viewer. So I feel like you would have wonderful tips here for the neuroscience community.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess my primary tip would just be to, again, apply. Feel free to reach out to me. Again, my email, I can put it in the chat as well, but it's jnowak@fb.com. Feel free to reach out to me either via email or via LinkedIn, and I can kind of send your resume through there. But in terms of things that we look for, definitely look for a lot of teams will look for a strong publication record. So if you are applying to any kind of academic, like research scientist positions, would definitely recommend submitting a CV over a resume. So make sure that if you have publications, we definitely want to see those. If you've had, awards, if you've presented at conferences, we do want to see those. Any kind of other academic collaborations, projects, any kind of lab work you've done, we also definitely want to see that as well. In terms of the actual interview process, it's going to vary a little bit team to team, but generally we do between 1 and 2 screens done over VC, just like this. And then an on-site interview. In ordinary times, that would actually be on-site. You would come to our either Redmond or New York or Zurich office, wherever the position is that you're interviewing for. However, due to the current situation, that has gone virtual as well. So
the only thing I'd add is that a lot of people I've seen get, to Dan's point, maybe, or question rather, I'll call it maybe bad advice. Only have your resume be 1 page, right? You hear this a lot. This is a myth. Don't feel like you have to restrict what you're applying to with 1 page, especially in the digital era where everything goes into a system anyways. A lot of recruiters, like the 3 of us, rely on keyword searches, specific projects, publications, things that you've worked on. Those things can greatly help us while we're in our systems looking for the right people for those positions. So keep that in mind. I think I see that advice a lot. I talk to even friends and family who say, well, I heard that I should only have my resume be 1 page. And I'm here to say that I believe that is a true myth and is not the case. So to Jacqueline's point, I think the more detail, the better is typically what I would advise as well.
One question I see pop up is around industry applicants. So how does that differ? How does applying as an industry applicant, we're currently working in a lab, differ from an academic candidate applying? And I just want to mention, and Mark can talk more about this, but I work extremely closely with my industry partner. So whether you're applying through Jacqueline or myself, we basically would forward your application on to our industry recruiter. As far as finding you and being a strong applicant, it's a similar process to what Mark was saying. We're really relying on, do you match the current need of the project at hand? So do you have the expertise to kind of tackle the current project at hand? So similar application process for industry as well. But I know they might have other ways to kind of recruit for those positions. Right, Mark, especially as you get like longer time in industry.
Yeah, and I 100% would agree on the partnership. I mean, a lot of the positions that we work on together, I think that the technologies and the research is so nascent that many times, us calling for 5 years of experience in a specific research area might be, unfair to put it at a minimal, but probably more unrealistic, right? So I agree with what Sarah said. There's a very close partnership. So I think in general, just getting your name in the system, with Jacqueline, with Sarah, with myself, I mean, that really is, I think, the key step, because we can work on the back end as a team to ensure that, your profile, if it's applicable, goes to the right people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know I mentioned Sarah and I are academic recruiters, but if you are working in industry, still feel free to reach out to me. As Sarah mentioned, we work very closely with our industry counterparts, and I can very easily forward your information along to our industry colleagues.
Well, I mean, it looks like we're about at time today. And I just want to say thank you again, Sarah, Jacqueline, and Mark, for both staying up late with us yesterday and getting up very early this morning. I just think for me personally, I would not have known how to go about this process from academia. So I'm sure this is helpful. So thank you. I also just wanted to add, we're going to be working on super tough problems for a long time. And if you're part of the community who is deep in a postdoc and has another year or two until you're ready to look at positions, don't forget about us. We'll still be here. Last point, I just want to say thank you to Sean for moderating these sessions and for all the NeuroMatch organizers, Megan and Brad and many others. We're really excited to be part of this community. I think you guys have set a standard for how to reach like really high quality content literally across the world. I've been impressed, and I think a lot of people will learn from what you've done across different domains. So thank you.
Well, thanks, Dan. That's really nice of you to say. And I'd just like to say, we obviously deeply appreciate our relationship with FRL and the support that you've given to the community, supporting, a huge number of our TAs in their work. And I also think that it's really great to showcase that computational neuroscience, which feels like some sort of esoterica at some point, has lots of real applications, and the work that we're doing and the tools that we're teaching, in this course are things that can be used to go out there and potentially change the world. And so it's cool for me, sitting in the academic chair, to see what you guys are doing as well. And so thanks for joining us on the NeuroMatch path. So. All right, everyone. Well, why don't we leave it there and look forward to the rest of your weekends.